I want you to close your eyes for a second because I want you to really hear something. I want you to concentrate and hear the opening synth of Don't You Forget About Me. I want you to hear the first notes of Danger Zone, of Eye of the Tiger, of I've Had the Time of My Life, or even Are You Ready for Some Football? Because I guarantee you could hear every single one of those without me ever playing them, because they're already in there, permanently attached to something specific. A summer, a Friday night, a Monday night, a drive, a moment, a person, a feeling that you've had that you've never been able to put into words, but have never once forgotten. That's not nostalgia. That's something completely different. The 80s and 90s didn't just give us great music. The 70s didn't just give us great music. They gave us a soundtrack of our lives, a complete identity, something so specific and so embedded in everything we did, every movie we saw, every show we watched, every commercial that came on TV, every drive we took, every summer vacation that we lived. Everything, and so much so that over 40 years later, you cannot think about that time period without hearing it too. And here's the thing nobody talks about. That relationship between music and the life that we shared, the way those songs attach themselves to certain moments and refuse to let go, that's gone. Not faded, not diminished, it's gone. Replaced by something infinite and instantly available and almost completely unmemorable. So tonight, I want to take you back. I want to tell you why the 80s and the 90s and the 70s had a soundtrack, what that soundtrack meant, and what we actually lost when the algorithm replaced that shared experience with a personalized playlist. So pop that tape in. I got you. Let's go do this. So here's the thing that I want to tell you about that makes this different than just some nostalgia trip, because that's not what this is. In the 80s and 90s, you didn't choose that soundtrack of our lives. Everyone around you was already living inside of it. The radio played it, the television broadcast it, the movies amplified it, the commercials embedded it, the arcades hummed it, the mall sounded like it, the video store had it playing while you browsed, the gym had it on speakers, the beach had it coming from a dozen boom boxes simultaneously, and the stadiums played it before every game. You could not escape it. And because you couldn't escape it, because everyone was hearing the same things at roughly the same moments, the music attached itself to life in a way that a personally curated playlist structurally just cannot replicate. The greatest playlist you ever had was not on Spotify. It was in your childhood. And unlike anything Spotify has ever served you, it didn't ask for permission. It just played. And the music that plays without asking your permission goes somewhere deeper in you than music that you choose deliberately. That's the difference. That's what we lost. And I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes or so proving it to you with specific memories that I guarantee you already know and feel in your heart. So I'm going to kick this off with a memory that is specific to me, but is also universal, because I have a memory that is a truth that just lives inside of me. And that is a couple of things together. One is driving around with my mom in her Camaro with an 8-track and then a cassette with the windows down, the old 255 air conditioning, 2 windows down, rolling 55 miles per hour, and listening to songs. It didn't matter what it was, whether they were coming from the radio or those 8-tracks or the cassettes. And then there was the drive down to Daytona Beach in our little Chevrolet S10 with a camper on the back, and us staying in the back with the back window out so that we could hear the music and feel the air conditioning on the drive down. These are things that I can still hear specifically, not fragments, not impressions. Every song, every note that we heard during that time, 40 years later, those songs didn't just play on the drive. They became the drive. They became the experience. They became the smell of the ocean getting closer and the excitement that you were almost there. They became the hot Georgia nights riding around with the car windows down. The music and the memory fused into something that functions as a single unit in my brain. You cannot separate them. Pull on a song and the memory comes with it. Pull on a memory and the song starts playing. I remember the hot girls in the bikinis in the 80s on the beach with their Walkmans or their boom boxes laying in the sun, hearing the same songs that were on the radio in that Camaro before, in that S10 on the drive down. The same songs that were coming from the boom boxes further up the shore. The same songs that would be playing at the beach at night or at the drive home on the end of the week. There was no algorithm. Those experiences just were formative. The soundtrack that was playing was everywhere simultaneously because the cultural footprint producing those songs shared that soundtrack and everyone was inside of it at the same time. And sadly, that is the part that is gone. Not the music. There's still music that exists today, obviously, and popular musicians. But every song I'm going to mention on this video they're all available, right? You can get them on your phone in the next 10 seconds if you want to. What is gone is the experience of the music finding you, developing in you without you finding the music. And those are completely different experiences that produce completely different memories. And we can't think back to that time without thinking about music and movies, soundtracks tied together, particularly in the 80s and on into the 90s, because every movie you saw, you probably knew the hit song for that movie soundtrack before you ever saw the movie. Not because you researched it and not because an algorithm served it to you when you were 3 weeks ahead of the release, but because the music was everywhere simultaneously and you were living inside of it. Danger Zone was on the radio before Top Gun came out. So when you sat down in the theater in the summer to watch Top Gun, you already were waiting to blast off into the danger zone. You already associated it with something exciting about to happen in the theater. That song and the film arrived in your nervous system from different directions, but at the same time. And that collision of arrivals produced something more powerful than either could produce on their own. And that is how it worked. Same thing with Ghostbusters. Ray Parker Jr.'s theme, basically just a couple of notes and you know them already. You hear them embedded into your consciousness. So before Bill Murray ever said a single line, you knew that song. Before Eddie Murphy took the screen as Axel Foley, you knew The Heat Is On. Every radio was playing it. No words needed to be said to get you excited for it. Back to the Future, Huey Lewis and the News, The Power of Love was your point of entry into a time travel story. And then Johnny B. Good, Chuck Berry's DNA running through a 1985 teen time travel comedy set in 1955, connecting over 40 years of American history, American music history in a single guitar riff played by a kid from the future at a school dance in the past. That is the power of music. And then you have The Breakfast Club, Don't You Forget About Me by Simple Minds, written specifically for John Hughes, became the emotional thesis for an entire generation's high school experience. Simple Minds wasn't even a popular band in America when that song came out. It was that film and that song that made the band what we think of. The two became permanently inseparable in a way that only happens when music and image find each other at the exact right shared cultural moment. And then you have Dirty Dancing. I've had the time of my, like, you want to sing it. That's the power of it. It won an Academy Award, over 11 million copies sold. That is serious power. And then Rocky IV, you're already coming off of Rocky III, which gave us Eye of the Tiger. Now Rocky IV gives us Hearts on Fire. It gives us No Easy Way Out. It's like one big long music video. These films didn't just use music. They invented a specific emotional language that music and image together created that no other could have created on their own. You cannot hear those songs today without seeing those films in your mind, and you cannot think of those films without hearing those songs in your head. The relationship is permanent. 40 plus years later, it is absolutely unbreakable because the music and the films lived in the shared space together at the same time. They couldn't help but becoming inseparable because they were just both part of our soundtrack. And then there was the sound of television, because this was not just movies. Television was big, and music with TV shows might have been even bigger, because you knew from the other room by the sound of the intro song on most television shows. The opening of Miami Vice had the synthesizer, but you also had stuff like the Golden Girls, that you knew the intro to that song. You can sing it right now if you want to. You're hearing it in your head as I am talking. And then there's stuff without any words to it. Magnum PI, you can hear that theme. Even if you can't hear it right now, the second you hear it, you're like, oh, I remember that. And then there's the fun, cheesy ones like The Greatest American Hero. Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. You can hear it. You can start singing it. You probably just did. And it was a ridiculous, crazy theme, but it was so endearing and so powerful. It captured the combination of the heart and total absurdity of that film at the same time, and it made the show work. And then, of course, you have some lesser known ones that are actually still popular today. The Fall Guy, the unknown stuntman, performed by Lee Majors, the star of the show himself. Now, I'm not the kind to kiss and tell, but I've been seen with Farrah. Listen, they made a whole movie again with Ryan Gosling with that, and took a big country star and had him redo that song because of the power of it. It was about a show about a stuntman who moonlights as a bounty hunter. Absolutely awesome. Very 80s. And then, of course, there's Cheers. Making the way in the world today. You want to go where everybody knows your name, right? Everybody knew that song. It was an emotional connection to it. And then maybe one of the biggest of all, you got the Dukes of Hazzard theme performed by Waylon Jennings, the Good Old Boys, Never Meaning No Harm. And if you grew up in the South, or really anywhere in the 80s, you knew that one, and you knew it was one to be proud of if you grew up around Georgia, because it was filmed here and supposed to happen here. These songs, listen, I could go on and on. Thank You for Being a Friend. I mean, Golden Girls, everybody knows. All of these, that is the power of the unified soundtrack of our lives, and it did not stop with regular live action TV shows. Oh, no, 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 because the cartoons were huge. The G.I. Joe intro theme song, G.I. Joe against Cobra, that you can probably start singing it right now. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Heroes on the Half Shell, Turtle Power. You know you wanted to sing it, but how about DuckTales? Woohoo! You know you just did that too, because don't even pretend you didn't. These are not just theme songs, they're the sonic architecture of our shared culture, of our shared experience. If you heard these themes, you knew where you were. You knew what time it was, what the world felt like, the specific evening, or the specific day of the week, or the certain childhood memory that you can attach to that. The music was a map of the era, and everyone was using that same map simultaneously, and we were all going to the same places together. And then I have to ask, are you ready for some football? Because I can't think of anything bigger as a soundtrack than Hank Williams Jr. singing the opening to Monday Night Football. That was huge. Are You Ready for Some Football became a cultural institution. Monday nights in America meant something certain was about to happen. You were about to get a big football game, and Hank Williams Jr. was going to rock it, and he was going to put those teams' names into that song. You felt it in your chest if it was your team. You felt it from the first snap. You felt it in a way that the current Monday Night Football theme, which it's not the same. It's not going to hit like that. It produces no cultural memory. It doesn't have that kind of power. You even had the NBA on NBC, and you had John Tesh's Roundball Rock, and maybe you don't know that by name, but go listen to it, and immediately, oh yeah, that's the NBA music right there. And then back then you had John Williams doing the Olympic score for broadcast. John Williams. These are soundtracks of our lives that we can remember just by closing our eyes and going back. They were not background music. They were emotional architecture of our lives. They made the events feel so much bigger and so much more important. They made the shows in the movies feel bigger and more important. They told you how to feel about what you were watching, and they did it to all of us simultaneously, and they produced a shared memory that is more powerful than any individual memory that you could possibly make. And that quality is gone from sports on television now. It's gone from most television shows now. The themes change. The music is generic. Nobody remembers it because it isn't trying to be remembered. It's trying to fill a space between commercials. And let's be honest, the commercials in that era, they weren't just filling space either. Because here's the truth, then everything had music. Commercials had music. Nike commercials, McDonald's, Coke commercials, the jingles, the licensed tracks, everything. You knew the McDonald's jingle. You knew all of that. And that was no accident. They did it deliberately because music has that kind of power. You had toy commercials, Pow Pow Power Wheels. All of that. Super Soaker had its own music. Every toy commercial in that era had its own music. The arcade, if you just walked by an arcade in 1987, you were walking into a wall of sound. Every machine had its own musical identity. The combination of the noise creations from each individual game, whether it's Mortal Kombat, or whether it is Donkey Kong or Pac-Man, you hear the sounds of that game, you hear the music over the radios, and it's all captured in there together. It's just like the mall. The mall had its own sound. You heard music coming from different stores. Each store kind of had its own vibe, its own music playing. It was all music that you had heard, but it was catered to each individual store. None of that was by accident, and that's why we remember it all the way that we do. I mean, if you want to get down to it, Blockbuster Video and Hollywood Video played different music, different scores, different things over their radios. Disney World had its own soundtrack. You heard the soundtrack of Disney movies throughout the park. None of that is by accident. All of that is tied to our emotional core in that unified soundtrack that pulls all those memories from one place or the other and puts them in one place together. That is how it succeeds, by grabbing all of them, the environment, all of that, cycling through and coming together. And then there were the sounds of the radio itself. Friday night, late night, for us, the video games running, the pizza was gone, we'd already watched the movies, and the music is on, and not for background, but for reasons, like specific reasons. You're waiting on your song to play. And that experience of waiting on your song to play on the radio is something I've talked about recently. That's really hard to explain if you didn't have to grow up with that, because if you grew up having access to music constantly, I know it sounds like a limitation or something you were being deprived of, or you got it better now, but it was actually like something you'd be glad to get back again. Is the exact opposite. Casey Kasem's American Top 40 Countdown was a a weekend institution. My mom listened to this. We listened to the countdown format. Of course, that's where I first learned. My mom, we were big Scooby-Doo fans, and she's like, Casey Kasem is Shaggy's voice. And then I was in forever. That is, again, the images tied in to the music. Casey Kasem's voice. You know, this is Casey Kasem with the top 40. I can't do it, but you know exactly. You can hear it without me doing it. He created something that was universally cultural. It played in the Ghostbusters movie, right? And that is impossible with streaming your music or any other kind of streaming. You couldn't skip ahead. You couldn't look up what was going to be number one, like skipping through chapters on a YouTube video. You had to wait. And the waiting, the arrival of the song that you had been hoping for, you felt genuinely like excited. It felt significant in a way that just scrolling your phone and pressing play never will. I've heard Danger Zone 10,000 times in my life. I've pressed play on it deliberately. I've heard it so many times you can't count. And not one of those times has it produced the same feeling as it did when it came out of the movie theater speakers and the speakers over the radios on the beach in the 1980s, when I was not expecting it, when it's like, oh, there's Danger Zone. And you just, what happened next can't really be explained to someone who can get it on an instant scroll. You had no control over it, and it was limited. And because it was fleeting, it was beautiful and powerful. On Friday nights, we would stay up and listen to all that. We would be talking about songs that we, had talked about at school and stuff. And then when they came on, you hit the play and record and you got a copy of it because you earned it, man. Because it only happened once that night, probably is all that was going to happen. And because that combination of the song and the moment and the Friday night and the people you're doing it with and the activities you're doing it with, they all blended together. And somehow underneath it all, in that teenage brain or young adult brain, that you didn't fully understand what you were experiencing, are the recognition of the unrepeatable quality that made that moment genuinely precious. We called that waiting. We called that anticipation. And anticipation is the thing that makes arrival feel like something special. Now here, there was a little regional thing, and this might not touch everybody, but we're going to get to that for just a second. It was your 100,000 watt doghouse, 106.1 WNGC out of Athens, Georgia. And every Saturday night after the Georgia Bulldogs football game, after Larry Munson had hunkered us down and his voice had told us all we needed to know about them dogs, the country station would shift to Country Gold Saturday night. And that's where you got the classic old school country, your Johnny Cash, your Waylon, your Chris Christopherson, all of that stuff was there. George Jones, Loretta Lynn. And I grew up in a mix of rural Georgia and going to Florida a lot. That's what I did. I grew up between those places, and I grew up between the football fields on Friday nights and the video rental stores around the corner. I've never really told anybody this out loud in the context of memory, but that sound, all of those things combined, it may not sound like much, but that's where I'm from. Not MTV, not the top 40, not the synthesizers of Miami Vice, or the guitar of Tom Petty, or John Williams' soaring soundtracks, just Waylon Jennings and the Marshall Tucker Band and the quality of a Georgia Saturday night after the Bulldogs game had gone off. That music connected me to something older than anything else in the soundtrack of my childhood. My grandparents knew those songs. My parents knew those songs. They'd been playing in Georgia on Saturday nights for decades before I was born, and they were playing on the same frequency where I had just heard the Bulldogs win again. That old world and my world existing on the same dial, the same frequency, on the same kind of Georgia night. I'm telling you this, not because Country Gold Saturday nights on 106.1 WNGC is something that you specifically share with me. You probably don't unless you're from the South. But everybody, I promise you, had a version of it. Everyone has that regional station that is about your specific experience, your specific place. And it is a transition from listening to one thing out of market to in market, the passage of the weekend. And while those might be different, they were still a shared experience in that difference. And that is something that has changed so much. The 80s and 90s had room for all of that simultaneously. The national soundtrack and your local soundtrack, the family soundtrack and the Friday soundtrack, the Saturday morning soundtrack and the beach soundtrack. The whole thing played at once without any algorithm deciding what part of it was appropriate for your demographic. You just lived inside of all of it, and that made it become yours and ours together. And that brings me to a 1980 Mazda RX7, my first car that I got in 1996, and I'm 16 years old, and I am driving over. The very first thing I did was take the last bit of money I had and upgrade that old bucket with a CD player. I had to have a CD player, and I went on my very first time driving the car by myself and picked up my best friend in the world, Lee Walters, and we went to Turtles Records and Tapes. That was the very first thing, because we had to establish that soundtrack. And if you know about Turtles Records and Tapes, you know it's like a Sam Goody or whatever, but it was here in the South. And we walked in, and the very first and only thing I had money to buy was one CD, and it was Jimmy Buffett's Songs You Know by Heart, which was a compilation of his greatest hits. The songs that we had spent summers listening to over Walkmans and boomboxes, drifting over the beach in Daytona, driving down to Daytona or over to Disney World, or just on a hot Georgia night when maybe we're just running over each other with the water hose. But that feeling of having that and popping that thing in, that silver disc was mine. And it was mine to drive and listen to whenever I wanted. And we drove for hours, windows down, Jimmy Buffett playing on the CD that I had spent everything getting, and singing every word, because just like it said, these were the songs that you knew by heart. And because those things had been so important for years, now that I was old enough to go somewhere on my own, they were even more important somehow. It had attached itself to me, to the physical experience of being alive in a place in time with people and friends that you loved, and then it stayed permanently, irreversibly, so that years later, you cannot hear Margaritaville without smelling the air of Daytona Beach. You can't feel the songs coming through the radio without thinking about being 16 years old, driving that Mazda RX7 with your best friend and your entire life ahead of you, and every good thing out there still possible. You cannot recreate that with a Spotify playlist. But the song finding you on the radio on a drive to Daytona, and the song arriving on the Walkman chosen by you specifically, are still two completely different things. Even then, different experiences that produce different memories. The first one stays with you forever. The second one fades a little bit. And that's not an accident. And that's not sentimentality. That's actually how the human memory works. The things that choose you go deeper and imprint longer than the things you choose yourself. And here's what happened. At first, gradually, and then all of a sudden, music went into one app, movies went into another app, TV went into 5 others, the radio became a relic, the cassette and the CD became old physical media, the boombox became a Bluetooth speaker, the Walkman became AirPods, the Saturday morning countdown became an algorithm deciding what you would probably want to hear based on what you listened to last Tuesday. Each of those things was presented as progress, more choice, more convenience, more access, more personalization, and each one of them served to just disconnect us more and more between the music and the life that we lived and shared together, because the connection required the music to find you rather than you finding the music. It required the surprise of a song coming on the radio at exactly the right moment or the wrong moment, and then becoming a permanent attachment to your memory forever. It required Hank Williams Jr. asking if you were ready for some football on a Monday night when you were already on the couch, because Monday night meant Monday Night Football and there was no choice involved. It required the DuckTales theme playing at the same time in the living room all across America, because Saturday morning meant cartoons and the whole country was watching cartoons together. Streaming gave each person their own perfect personalized soundtrack, and somehow that perfect personalized soundtrack has produced less attachment, less memories, and less experience than any generation in the history of recorded sound, because we choose it from an endless supply, because the things you choose do not embed like those things that choose you. And the funny thing is, we still know this. Top Gun Maverick knew it for sure. It understood it completely. When Danger Zone came back in 2022, an entire generation stopped what they were doing and went back to the movie theaters. Not because the song was new, not because the actor or even really the story or the look of it was new. Actually, it was the exact opposite. It was because it was attached to us. It was a part of us that we were getting to see come back to life again, permanently back and irreversibly. It was there again, and it had been carrying with us for all those years, just waiting to live and breathe again. The song found us again across 40 years through a movie theater, the way that it used to work the best, and all those memories and then the money in the box office came with it. So Danger Zone, Don't You Forget About Me, The Heat Is On, Eye of the Tiger, I've Had the Time of My Life, Are You Ready for Some Football, DuckTales, Good Old Boys, The Unknown Stuntman, Making Your Way in the World Today, Taking Everything You Got, Waylon Jennings on a Saturday night in Georgia after the Dogs played ball, Jimmy Buffett on a CD in a 1980 Mazda RX7 on the way to the beach, or just hanging out with your best friend. Your song finally coming on the radio at 11:47 p.m. on a Friday night when you've been waiting since Tuesday to hit play and record. We didn't just grow up with great music. We grew up inside a soundtrack. One that played everywhere simultaneously, one that nobody programmed and nobody chose and nobody curated, one that just played because that's what culture did. It sounded like itself completely and without apology or worried about offending. In every movie, in every show, in every commercial, in every cartoon, in every stadium, every mall, every bedroom and car with a radio, a cassette tape, an 8-track, a vinyl, a CD, it didn't matter. It attached itself to every moment of those years so completely and so permanently that over 40 years later, you cannot separate the music from the memory. It was your childhood. It was the soundtrack of our lives. And it was unlike anything Spotify has ever served you, because it did not ask for permission. It just played. That was the soundtrack of our lives, and we shared it together. So drop your favorite part of the soundtrack, your favorite track. It can be on the A side or it can be on the B side. You let me know the song that takes you back in time and transports you to a different place in time every time you hear it. The one that's playing in your head right now, the one you're thinking of, because I already know what's happening. It's earworming you in, and you can't wait to listen to it and sing it out loud and bring it back to life again. And that's what I got for you this time. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, hype up the video. This is one that was very personal, and I wanted to do it, and I hope you enjoyed it. Of course, we do all kinds of movies, pop culture, TV, and everything here, and I'm just proud to have you along for the ride. But until next time, be kind, rewind like always. This is Chase with AV Pop Culture, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye. I know.